Imagine rolling your Harley into your own driveway after a long day, only to be confronted by a teenager yelling that your bike now belongs to him. Absurd, right? Well, that's exactly what happened to me when the entitled son of our neighborhood's infamous HOA Karen decided my Harley Davidson was his personal prize. He screamed, threatened, and even called the cops on me. But what he didn't know was that I had a powerful ally on speed dial, the state attorney himself. And what unfolded next was a mix of entitlement, legal firepower, and a lesson this kid and his mother won't forget. I've lived in this neighborhood for years now, and for the most part, it's a quiet and comfortable place. The lawns are green, the kids play in the streets, and the neighbors usually wave when they pass by. It's the kind of community you'd imagine in a suburban brochure, peaceful, friendly, and picture-perfect. But like most things that seem too good to be true, there's always a catch. And in this neighborhood, the catch comes in the form of one massive headache. Our homeowners association president. Let's call her Karen. Now, if you've ever dealt with a Karen, you know exactly the type. She's the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac, the self-proclaimed enforcer of rules, and the kind of person who always believes her opinion is the law of the land. Karen doesn't just follow the HOA guidelines. She interprets them however it suits her, and heaven forbid you step even an inch out of line. This woman measures the length of people's grass like she's auditioning for a landscaping competition. I've literally seen her crouched on a neighbor's lawn with a ruler in hand, shaking her head like she'd just uncovered a federal crime. She counts how many cars are in each driveway, and if you have one too many parked out front, you can bet she'll fire off a strongly worded letter taped to your door by sunrise. And don't even get me started on her crusade against noise. If kids are riding their bikes a little too loudly, she'll march outside with her hands on her hips and scold them as if they were out committing felony-level offenses. To put it simply, she's the type of person who makes you wish there were an HOA for the HOA president, because she desperately needs someone keeping her in check. Now here's where I come in. I'm a biker. Always have been. My pride and joy is a pristine Harley Davidson that I've cared for like it's my own child. I've put years into maintaining it, polishing it, and customizing it. That bike isn't just a machine. It's freedom on two wheels. It's the feeling of wind on your face after a long day, the roar of the engine that makes your heart race, and the symbol of a lifestyle I've worked hard for. It's loud, it's powerful, and yeah, it definitely turns heads. Some neighbors admire it. They'll stop me when I'm rolling down the street, asking questions, giving a thumbs up, or just saying, "Nice ride." Others smile politely, maybe a little intimidated by the rumble of the exhaust, but they know it's harmless. But Karen? Oh no. Karen despises it. She's told me more times than I can count that motorcycles lower property values. She claims they're dangerous, noisy, and a menace to suburban peace. She's actually sent me 3 written complaints over the years, demanding that I remove the motorcycle from the premises. As if it were a rusted junk car abandoned in the front yard, instead of a Harley worth more than most of the SUVs in the neighborhood. Every time, I've politely reminded her that the HOA has no authority over what vehicles I own, especially when it's legally parked in my driveway. That usually shuts her up for a little while, but not without plenty of huffing, puffing, and muttering about how I was setting a bad example for the neighborhood. And if you thought Karen was bad, wait until you hear about her son. Let's call him Chad. He's around 17, though if you watched him act, you'd think he was about 12. Spoiled beyond belief. He struts around the neighborhood like he owns the place, puffing his chest out and talking down to everyone like they're his personal servants. He's the type of kid who's never heard the word no in his life. Karen has bought him not 1, but 2 brand new cars. And guess what? He's already managed to total them both. One he wrecked by trying to race his buddy down the main road, and the other he drove straight into a ditch because he was too busy texting to look at the road. Any normal parent would take this as a wake-up call to teach their kid responsibility. Maybe give them an old beater car, make them work for gas money, or even take away the keys for a while. But Karen? Nope. She just keeps enabling him. She blames the accidents on poor road maintenance or reckless drivers getting in his way. She makes excuses for him, saying things like, "He's just learning," or "It's not his fault." And instead of disciplining him, she rewards him with more. So, with that in mind, it shouldn't surprise you that Chad has grown up thinking the entire world owes him everything. If he sees something he wants, he believes he has a right to take it. And unfortunately for me, one day, the thing he wanted was sitting right in my driveway, my Harley Davidson. The first time he laid eyes on it, I could see the wheels turning in his head. He circled it like a shark in the water, asking questions that were less about curiosity and more about sizing up his new toy. "How fast does it go?" he asked. "How much is it worth?" Then came the kicker. "You ever think about selling it?" I laughed it off and told him no, it wasn't for sale. But his smirk told me he wasn't planning on asking nicely again. To him, everything in life had been handed over eventually, one way or another. And now he had his sights set on my Harley. From that moment, things started going downhill fast. He'd make comments whenever he saw me riding. Things like, "Man, I'd look good on that." Or, "You should let me take it for a spin." When I ignored him, he'd escalate, saying, "You don't really need it, do you? I mean, I deserve a bike like that." At first, I thought it was just teenage bravado. But then, I started noticing him hanging around my driveway, way too close to my Harley for comfort. One time, I caught him actually sitting on it while I was inside grabbing groceries. When I stormed out, he hopped off and laughed, like it was no big deal. That's when I realized, this wasn't just teenage entitlement. Chad had convinced himself that my Harley was going to be his. And when you mix an overbearing HOA Karen with a spoiled Chad who thinks the world is his playground, you've got a recipe for chaos. Because the day was coming when Chad wasn't just going to ask anymore. He was going to demand. It was a Friday evening, one of those golden dusky nights where the sun dips low and paints the whole neighborhood in a warm glow. I had just returned from a long, satisfying ride on my Harley. The engine still rumbled beneath me as I rolled into my driveway, that familiar vibration buzzing through my bones. I swung the bike into its spot with practiced ease, kicked down the stand, and sat there for a moment just listening to the engine tick down as it cooled. For me, these were the best moments. Coming home after a ride always felt like exhaling a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. Helmet still strapped, gloves still on, jacket creaking as I moved. I was content. But peace never lasts long when you live next to that family. Before I could even pull my helmet off, I saw him, Chad, storming across the street, like a wannabe sheriff marching into town. He had that same swagger he always carried, shoulders rolled back, chin up, and that smirk plastered across his face like the world owed him something. Except this time, his eyes weren't just locked on me. They were locked on my Harley. "Hey man," he called out, striding into my driveway like it was his own. He stopped just a few feet away, hands stuffed into his hoodie pockets like he was about to make a business deal. "I'll take the keys now." For a split second, I thought I'd misheard him through the muffling of my helmet. I pulled the chin strap loose, slid the helmet off, and shook my head. "Excuse me," I asked, genuinely thinking maybe he was joking. But Chad's smirk widened. He jabbed a thumb at my bike, nodding like this was the most natural conversation in the world. "The Harley. Mom says motorcycles aren't allowed in this neighborhood. So, to avoid fines, you can just give it to me. I'll take care of it." I swear, I almost choked laughing. I leaned back on my bike seat, helmet in hand, and just stared at him. "That's not how anything works, kid. This is my motorcycle. You're not getting it." Now, most people would have laughed back, maybe rolled their eyes and walked away. But not Chad. His face twisted instantly, like someone had just slapped him across the mouth. His smug grin evaporated, and in its place came this blotchy red flush crawling up his neck and cheeks. His fists clenched at his sides. His voice went from cocky to shrill in about 2 seconds flat. "You can't tell me no. My mom runs this neighborhood. She's the HOA president. That means she decides what's allowed and what's not." I raised an eyebrow, trying to keep my cool. "And what does that have to do with you taking my motorcycle?" Chad puffed out his chest, stepping closer until he was practically standing over my front tire. His eyes darted between me and the Harley, like he couldn't decide which one he hated more. "It means she has the authority to reassign things that break the rules." That's what she told me. And since motorcycles aren't allowed, she said I could claim it. I blinked at him, stunned. This kid actually believed his mom's power trip over the HOA gave her the legal right to take someone else's property and hand it to him like a Christmas present. I swung my leg off the Harley and stood up, towering over him now. Listen, kid, I said, keeping my voice low and firm. Your mom might run the HOA, but she doesn't own me, and she sure as hell doesn't own this motorcycle. You can't claim what doesn't belong to you. That's not authority, that's theft. His face darkened even more, lips curling like he'd just bitten into something sour. He jabbed a finger toward me, trembling with frustration. You don't get it. This isn't your choice, my mom said. I cut him off, stepping forward just enough to make him back up a few inches. I don't care what your mom said. This Harley is mine. I paid for it, I ride it, and I maintain it. Neither you nor your mom is ever going to change that. So you'd better back off before this turns into something you're not ready for. I thought that would be the end of it. I expected him to sulk away, maybe stomp his feet like he usually did when someone dared to tell him no. But instead, he did something that left me standing there in disbelief. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. With trembling fingers, he unlocked it, brought it up to his ear, and snarled, "Fine. If you don't give it to me, I'll call the cops myself." For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The faint hum of the Harley's engine cooling, the chirping of crickets starting up in the bushes, even the distant sound of a car driving down the next street over. All of it faded as I processed what this kid had just said. He wasn't bluffing. His thumb was already swiping across the screen, dialing. He was actually going to waste police time to report what exactly? That a grown man refused to hand over his legally owned motorcycle to a teenager because his mom said so? I almost laughed again, but the seriousness in his eyes stopped me. He wasn't joking. He wasn't playing around. In his warped little bubble of entitlement, this was real. This was justice. I took a step back, shaking my head slowly. Are you serious right now? You're really about to call the cops on me? For not giving you my Harley? He sneered. Damn right I am. And when they show up, they'll listen to my mom. And then you'll have no choice. And just like that, the quiet Friday evening I'd been enjoying evaporated. I knew right then that things were about to spiral way out of control. Because if Chad was crazy enough to make that call, and his mother was crazy enough to back him up, I was about to have one very long night on my hands. I crossed my arms, watching him pace with the phone pressed to his ear, and one thought repeated in my mind. This kid has no idea what kind of storm he's about to unleash. Sure enough, within 20 minutes, I saw the flashing red and blue lights rolling slowly down the street. 2 police officers pulled up in front of my house, their cruiser idling at the curb. And there, like vultures circling their prize, were Karen and Chad. They stood at the end of my driveway, waving frantically as if they had just uncovered some kind of major crime scene. Karen had her HOA binder clutched to her chest, like it was the Constitution itself, while Chad puffed out his chest, like a victorious gladiator about to claim his spoils. I leaned casually against my Harley, arms folded, doing my best to look calm, even though I could feel the tension in my gut. The whole situation was absurd, but if I've learned anything in life, it's that absurdity mixed with entitlement can get ugly real fast. As the officer stepped out of the car, Karen wasted no time. She stormed forward, heels clicking against the pavement, finger pointing dramatically toward me like she was unveiling a criminal mastermind. "Officers," she screeched, her voice carrying across the street. "There he is. That's the one I've been telling you about. This man is violating HOA policy, disturbing the peace with that monstrosity, and refusing to comply with neighborhood regulations. And worst of all," she jabbed her finger toward my Harley, "he's refusing to surrender that illegal motorcycle, even though my son has already claimed possession to protect this community." I swear, the way she delivered it, you'd think I had robbed a bank. Her son, standing beside her, nodded vigorously. "Yeah, that's right. He's breaking the rules. Mom said it's mine now, and he won't hand it over." The 2 officers glanced at each other, their brows knitting in visible confusion. One, a tall man with a notebook in hand, cleared his throat and asked, "Okay, hold on. Let's slow down. Can you explain again what exactly you're accusing him of? Karen took a dramatic breath, puffing herself up. This neighborhood has rules. Motorcycles aren't allowed here. They're loud, dangerous, and lower property values. As HOA president, I have the authority to reassign non-compliant property. My son has claimed his Harley as his, and this man is obstructing that legal process. The shorter officer, a woman with kind eyes but a look of utter disbelief, blinked a few times. Ma'am, you're saying you can take his motorcycle because of HOA rules? Yes, Karen snapped. That's exactly what I'm saying. It's the law in this neighborhood. The officers looked at me now, waiting for my response. I straightened up, adjusted my jacket, and spoke calmly, because in situations like this, calmness is everything. Officers, I began, pointing to the Harley. This motorcycle is legally mine. I have the registration and insurance in the house, if you need to see it. HOA rules don't override state law, and they certainly don't grant anyone the right to seize someone else's personal property, especially not a teenager who thinks he can just claim it because his mom said so. The tall officer scribbled notes, nodding. All right, sir, I hear you. That does make sense. But before he could say more, Karen burst in again, her voice reaching an almost theatrical pitch. No. He's lying. You don't understand. If you let this man keep that motorcycle, it sets a dangerous precedent for the entire neighborhood. I'll escalate this all the way to the highest levels of government if I have to. At that, I couldn't help but smirk. The highest levels of government? Was she planning on dragging the President of the United States into a suburban HOA spat about a Harley Davidson? Still, I knew I needed to shut this circus down before it spiraled further. And I had just the ace up my sleeve to do it. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and began dialing. You know what, Karen? Let's escalate it. Let's go as high as we can. She sneered, clearly convinced I was bluffing. Oh, please. Who could you possibly call that would matter more than me? That's when I said the name. Out loud. The state attorney, my cousin. The second the words left my mouth, I saw it. That smug, self-satisfied grin on Karen's face faltered. Her eyes darted to the officers, then back to me. She clearly hadn't expected that. When the line connected, I handed the phone to the tall officer. Here, he'll want to speak to you. The officer raised his brows, took the phone, and said, Hello, sir. Yes, this is Officer Daniels. Then he walked a few steps away, listening intently. Meanwhile, Karen stood frozen, her binder clutched tighter than ever. Chad shifted uncomfortably, glancing between me, the Harley, and his mother, as if the foundation of his little fantasy was starting to crack. After a minute, the officer returned. He handed my phone back, his expression now completely serious. He looked at Karen and Chad, his tone shifting from neutral to authoritative. Ma'am, I just spoke with the state attorney. He made it very clear. The HOA has zero legal authority to seize or redistribute personal property. Any attempt to do so would be considered theft. Furthermore, filing false police reports and harassing your neighbor could carry legal consequences. Karen's jaw dropped. For once, she was speechless. Her lips opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air, her face pale with shock. The shorter officer stepped in, her voice firm. Ma'am, sir, this isn't a joke. You can't just call the police because you want someone else's belongings. If this continues, there could be fines or charges filed. Karen finally found her voice, though it was trembling now instead of booming. I didn't mean. I was just trying to. Chad interrupted, muttering under his breath. I just wanted a bike. The tall officer snapped his notebook shut. Wanting something doesn't make it yours. You need to understand that. Both of you. The shift was almost comical. Moments earlier, Karen had been screaming about authority and government escalation, and Chad had been puffing up like a rooster ready to fight. Now they both stood there looking like scolded schoolchildren, their power trip completely dismantled. The officers gave me a respectful nod before turning back to them one final time. This is your warning. Don't waste police resources on nonsense like this again. If you keep harassing your neighbor, it won't just be a warning next time. With that, They got back in their cruiser and drove off, leaving Karen and Chad standing there in silence. The sound of the engine, fading down the street, was like music to my ears. I picked up my helmet, placed it on the Harley seat, and looked directly at Karen. Next time you think about coming after my bike, remember this moment. The law isn't on your side, and neither is the neighborhood anymore. Her cheeks flushed crimson, but she said nothing. She spun on her heel, muttering under her breath, and stormed off with Chad shuffling behind her, head down and shoulders slumped. For the first time that evening, I felt the tension melt away. I glanced at my Harley, its chrome gleaming under the porch light, and smiled. My bike was safe, my ground was defended, and Karen had just been handed the reality check she'd been begging for. And something told me this wasn't the last time she'd test me. But after tonight, she knew exactly how far I was willing to go. When the cops drove off that night, lights fading into the distance, I stood there in my driveway with my Harley gleaming under the porch light. I thought to myself, finally, that's over. The adrenaline from the encounter was still buzzing in my veins, but I felt like I'd won the war. Karen and her spoiled son had been warned by law enforcement themselves. Surely that would be enough to shut this circus down. But here's the thing about people like Karen. They don't quit. They don't learn. They don't take no as the end of the conversation. For someone like her, no is just a challenge, a wall to push harder against until something gives. And true to form, she couldn't resist making one last move. About a week later, I opened my mailbox to find a thick envelope stamped with the HOA logo. I knew immediately who it was from. My stomach sank, but I also laughed, because at this point, Karen was nothing if not predictable. I tore it open right there by the curb. Inside was a formal notice from the HOA, printed on fancy letterhead with all the pomp and authority Karen could muster. The letter demanded, in no uncertain terms, that I remove the motorcycle from my property within 7 days, or face escalating fines and enforcement action. It went on for paragraphs, filled with big legal-sounding words she clearly Googled at 2 a.m., citing random HOA bylaws and completely ignoring the fact that none of them actually gave her jurisdiction over my Harley. It was the written equivalent of one of her screaming rants. All noise, no substance. I stood there shaking my head, the letter flapping in the breeze. Neighbors walking their dogs slowed down to watch me, curious. I waved the paper and said, "Guess who still hasn't learned?" They chuckled knowingly. Everyone had their own Karen story. But this time, I wasn't just going to laugh it off. I decided enough was enough. Instead of calling Karen directly or firing back with my own angry response, I picked up my phone and called my cousin, the state attorney. I explained the situation, told him about the letter, and before I could even finish, he sighed and said, "Send me a copy. I'll handle it." A couple of days later, I had in my hands a professional, airtight response. It wasn't emotional, it wasn't loud. It was cold, factual, and devastating. Point by point, the letter dismantled every claim Karen had made. It cited state property laws. It highlighted how HOA authority is limited and does not extend to seizing personal vehicles. It addressed harassment, intimidation, and misuse of HOA power. And just to add weight, it outlined the legal consequences for anyone attempting to enforce unlawful actions. It was the kind of letter that doesn't yell, it crushes. I slipped it into an envelope and hand-delivered it to the HOA board. I didn't give it to Karen. Oh no. I gave it to her peers. And that made all the difference. Within days, whispers started circling the neighborhood. People were talking. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. And the next thing I knew, Karen's reign of terror was over. She was voted out as president. Just like that. Turns out, I wasn't the only one sick of her antics. Other neighbors had been quietly stewing for years about her constant nitpicking, her letters, her confrontations. My Harley was just the final straw, the spark that lit the powder keg. Once the board saw the state attorney's letter, they realized Karen wasn't just being a pain. She was putting them all at risk of legal trouble. And they weren't about to go down with her. I didn't attend the meeting myself, but I heard from multiple neighbors that it wasn't pretty. Karen apparently tried to defend herself, waving her binder, shouting about community standards and ungrateful residents. But the more she talked, the worse she looked. By the end of it, she was practically shouting at the entire room. The vote to remove her was nearly unanimous. And just like that, the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac lost her crown. The days that followed were noticeably quieter. No more letters shoved under my door. No more finger-wagging at neighbors for leaving trash bins out an extra hour. No more Karen patrolling the streets like a prison warden. It was as if the whole neighborhood collectively took a deep breath of relief. But what about Chad? Chad. The kid who thought my Harley would magically become his. I still see him around sometimes, skulking down the sidewalk with his headphones on, hoodie pulled low, trying to look tough. And every single time I ride past on my Harley, I can feel his eyes burning holes into me. He doesn't say anything now, though. Not a word. No more demands, no more cocky smirks. Just a glare. The kind of glare that says he knows he lost. Badly. I like to think he learned a lesson from all this. That entitlement and tantrums won't get you what you want. That mommy's power doesn't protect you forever. And that sometimes, when you push too hard, the world pushes back harder. As for me, I still ride my Harley proudly through the neighborhood, the chrome gleaming in the sunlight, the engine roaring like a battle cry of victory. Each time I roll past Karen's house, yes, she still lives there, just without her precious title. I can almost hear the faint grinding of her teeth behind the curtains. And honestly, that roar of the Harley sounds sweeter than ever. Because in the end, the whole ordeal wasn't just about a motorcycle. It was about standing your ground. About not letting entitled people bully you into submission. About knowing your rights and defending them. Karen tried to use her fake authority. Chad tried to use his entitlement. And in the end, both of them ran headfirst into something stronger than either. The truth. And the truth is, justice doesn't always come with flashing lights or courtrooms. Sometimes it comes with a leather jacket, a set of chrome handlebars, and the rumble of a Harley Davidson rolling proudly down the street.